Richards. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. I can't complain, Rob. I'm in sunny California right now, so what's there to complain about?
I was gonna say, so where exactly are you? You're in Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm near an area called the Grove, which is like an indoor-outdoor mall, it was just very popular, and actually where I used to always go see my movie theaters, which of course I haven't been able to do in months yet, but looking forward to getting back to that as soon as possible.
I mean, all of us are. You're exactly right.
Oh man.
So tell us how the Nantucket connection kind of. Why are we talking to someone from LA right now? Where's your Nantucket ties? Because they go
Yeah,
deep.
so I've been going to Nantucket my entire life. Basically, my mother, when she was proposed to by my dad, which was their third date, which is the way I guess things were done back then, she accepted his proposal, but on the condition that he would promise that she would come back to Nantucket every summer. That, in addition to at least 4 kids, and we ended up with 6. So I guess you got the bonus plan.
Amazing. And so you've been going back pretty your whole life.
Yeah, actually every summer of my life, except for there was a window probably of about 15, 20 years when I stopped going to Nantucket, and that was when I was in the cult.
There's a fair bit of folks that'll be listening to this that have read your story in the magazine, but for those that haven't, kind of talk a little bit about how Nantucket is also this jumping off point.
Yeah,
as it really set a chapter in your life.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine that you would potentially meet a cult leader on the beach of Novadear, but that's how it kind of went down. And the funny thing about my experience with this group, which eventually became to be known as Eternal Values, was when I met this guy, Freddie Von Meers. And it's fun. What's funny about him is his actual name is Freddie Myers, but somewhere one of his friends said somewhere on the way over in the boat, he became Frederick Von Meers, this Dutch descent, but he was actually just a Jewish guy from Brooklyn. And but he put on this whole other facade, and that's the man I met. And he was actually friends with my friend group, who I would hang out with at Novadear. I was 16 at the time. I was painting houses. I had, it was just a place that I would always go to that I thought, if nothing else, was safe. So I didn't really have any guards up, and I'd heard about this person through my friends. So I really wasn't concerned, because in some way he'd been vetted, and what I mean by that is they had said, oh yeah, this guy, he's kind of like a flashback from the 60s. He's into all this kind of Eastern stuff, and philosophy and reincarnation and gems and crystals. And at 16, I wouldn't say that was something that I was particularly into, but I was curious by that sort of thing. And we just literally struck up a conversation on the beach, and that led to a friendship that I would just see him occasionally around the island, because as we both know, the island's not very big.
Right.
And he was always on his bike. He never drove. And by the time I graduated high school and was going off to school in England for a year, and then eventually went to college in New Jersey at Princeton. We were quite good enough friends that he had offered to invite me up to New York and see what New York was like, and with the standing offer that he went to Studio 54 all the time. And so my first encounters with him and his so-called entourage were going to Studio 54 and having wild times, which is not what you think of as an indoctrination process of a cult, but that's kind of how it evolved. And by the time I graduated college, it was 1985, and I actually moved in with him and the group in New York in an apartment. And there we had about 3 or 4 apartments, and eventually 8 or 9 apartments in this one building. And I actually got to stay in the apartment where he lived. So he would stay in the bedroom, and there would be like 4 or 5 of us that would sleep out in the living room on mats, like an ashram.
You were living these kind of, during your time in the cult, you were living these 2 juxtaposed lives, because on one hand, you're living kind of like the ashram, nothing lifestyle, where it's very simple. But then with your modeling career, I mean, you weren't just a model, you were the model. And so you're in shoots with Cindy Crawford and Christy Turlington, and you're jetting over all over the world for these shoots. And then you're coming back to this life of, what would you, servitude, or your simple kind of communal living?
Well, it is. It's the interesting thing about the way the cult dynamic works is it's very much a bait and switch in the sense that you sign up for one thing and then it actually is something else. The way cults work is they set up a very firm format of how you're supposed to behave, what's expected of you. There's certain principles you're supposed to be living by. So really, it's very black and white in the sense that either you're doing it or you're not. And so either living in accordance to that or you're in trouble. And a lot of my cult life was just trying not to be in trouble. And you don't realize how much peer pressure and kind of authoritarian compliance can play on someone's psyche to the point where you literally are doing and saying things that you would never do out of your own volition. But it's a very slow process. The best analogy is like how you cook a frog, where if you throw a frog in hot water, it's going to jump right out. But if you put a frog in lukewarm water and incrementally turn up the heat, it'll stay in there till it dies.
Right.
And that's kind of the process I endured. And yet, having said all that, when I got out, making sense of what I went through, learning how to forgive myself, and then also answer all the questions that all my family and friends were asking, looking at me like, dude, what happened? Was actually much harder than being in the cult. And that's been the challenge for the last 20 years, is to find a way to develop the communication skills to put people at ease with what my experience was, so that we can kind of build some understanding, so I don't feel like people are looking at me sideways. But more importantly, I realized that the experience I went through was in many ways an extreme version of relationships that we all encounter.
100%.